The cabin hummed with the low, steady vibration of the engines as Flight 714 leveled out above the clouds. Overhead lights glowed softly, reflecting off plastic tray tables and the narrow aisle that divided the rows. Maya pressed her forehead against the window, watching the sky stretch endlessly, pale blue fading into white. Beside her, her younger brother Jordan tapped his fingers nervously on his knee, while their older sister Renee scrolled through her phone, pretending not to notice the tension creeping through the cabin. They were traveling together for the first time in years, called home by the sudden illness of their grandmother. The tickets had been expensive, the timing rushed, and emotions already ran high. Maya could still hear their mother's voice echoing in her head, reminding them to stick together, to be careful, to come home safely. That promise felt heavier now, suspended miles above the ground. A flight attendant's voice cut through the air, sharp and impatient. "Sir, you need to put that away right now." Heads turned. The man across the aisle fumbled with his phone, apologizing quietly. The attendant sighed loudly, the sound carrying farther than necessary. Renee's jaw tightened. She'd heard that tone before, the one that assumed guilt before explanation. Minutes later, as the beverage cart rolled closer, Jordan shifted in his seat, his elbow brushing the aisle. The cart stopped abruptly. "Excuse me." The same attendant snapped. "You can't stick your arm out like that." Jordan pulled back immediately. "Sorry, I didn't mean." She didn't let him finish. "I'll find out in 60 seconds if you keep causing problems," she said, her voice loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Maya felt heat rush to her face. "You said sorry," she said calmly. "It was an accident." The attendant turned toward her, eyes narrowed. "Are you arguing with me?" she asked. Renee looked up then. "No one's arguing," she said. "We're just asking you not to talk to him like that." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Some passengers stared openly, others pretended to be absorbed in magazines. The attendant straightened, crossing her arms. "You're bluffing about that call button," she said, pointing at Maya. "Press it, and you'll see what happens." The words landed like a slap. Jordan's hands trembled as he folded them together. Renee stood up slowly, careful not to raise her voice. "We don't want trouble," she said. "We just want respect." The attendant's face flushed. "Sit down," she ordered. "Right now." The authority in her tone felt less like professionalism and more like power being tested. A man in the row ahead leaned back slightly. "She's being unreasonable," he muttered to his wife. Across the aisle, a woman shook her head, whispering something about people needing to behave on planes. Maya felt trapped between judgment and silence, unsure which would hurt more. The attendant reached for her radio. "I'm calling the captain," she announced. "We have uncooperative passengers." The word uncooperative echoed ominously. Jordan swallowed hard. "Please," he said softly. "We're just trying to get home." His voice cracked, betraying fear. He hated showing. Time stretched. The engines roared steadily, indifferent. Finally, another flight attendant approached, older, calmer. "What's going on?" she asked. The first attendant launched into a clipped explanation, painting the siblings as disruptive. Renee listened, stunned by how easily the story shifted. The second attendant looked at them carefully. "Is that accurate?" she asked. Maya met her eyes. "No," she said. "We haven't done anything wrong." There was a pause, long enough to feel dangerous. Then the older attendant nodded. "I'll take it from here." She asked the first attendant to step aside. The aisle seemed to breathe again. Passengers leaned back, the invisible audience settling. The older attendant crouched slightly to be eye level with Jordan. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. He nodded, though his eyes were still wide. "I'm sorry for how this was handled," she said. "We'll make sure you're comfortable for the rest of the flight." Renee exhaled, tension draining from her shoulders. "Thank you," she said quietly. Maya felt something loosen in her chest, though the sting of what had happened remained. Later, as the plane began its descent, the captain's voice came over the intercom. He apologized for any discomfort during the flight and thanked passengers for their patience. Some people clapped softly. The first attendant avoided their row entirely. When the wheels touched down, relief washed through the cabin. As they stood to collect their bags, the man from the front row turned to them. "You handled that with grace," he said. The woman across the aisle offered a small, embarrassed smile. Walking through the jet bridge, Renee squeezed Maya's hand. "I'm proud of us," she said. Jordan nodded. "Me too." The airport buzzed with movement, but for the first time since boarding, they felt steady. They moved slowly through the terminal, letting the crowd surge ahead, each step grounding them after hours of tension. Jordan kept replaying the moment in his head, the way the attendant's voice had risen, the way his own had shrunk. He wondered if he should have spoken louder, or not at all. Renee noticed his silence and nudged him gently. "You did nothing wrong," she said, as if reading his thoughts. He nodded, grateful. At baggage claim, they waited shoulder to shoulder. Screens flickered with carousel numbers. A child laughed somewhere behind them, the sound startling in its normalcy. Maya watched suitcases tumble onto the belt, thinking about how quickly strangers decided who belonged and who didn't. On the plane, a small movement had turned into an accusation. On the ground, everyone was just another tired traveler. Their bags arrived last. Renee hauled the largest one off the belt, grunting. "Grandma better appreciate this," she joked weakly. Jordan smiled for the first time since landing. Humor, even strained, felt like a release valve. They headed toward the exit, the automatic doors whooshing open to reveal their uncle waiting beyond the barrier. He pulled them into a group hug, his arms strong and familiar. "I'm glad you made it," he said. "Your grandma's been asking about you nonstop." Maya closed her eyes for a second, letting the airport noise fade. The flight already felt distant, like a storm past but not forgotten. In the car ride home, Renee finally told their uncle what had happened. His grip tightened on the steering wheel. "I'm sorry you went through that," he said. "Some people forget their power isn't permission." The words settled heavily, but truthfully. That night, after visiting their grandmother and ensuring she was resting comfortably, the siblings sat on the porch, the air thick with summer heat. Crickets chirped rhythmically. Jordan broke the silence. "Do you think we should complain?" he asked. Renee considered it. "Part of me wants to forget it," she said. "But part of me thinks staying quiet lets it happen again." Maya stared out at the dark yard. "We don't have to decide tonight," she said. But what happened mattered. She thought about the older flight attendant, the brief moment of validation, and how different the outcome could have been if no one had stepped in. The next morning, Maya opened her laptop and began typing. Not a complaint yet, just notes. She described the tone, the words, the way the cabin had felt like a courtroom without a judge. Renee read over her shoulder, adding details. Jordan watched, feeling a mix of nerves and pride. This was new territory, but it felt necessary. When they finally submitted the report days later, there was no immediate satisfaction. No dramatic apology arrived. But a week after returning home, an email came acknowledging their experience and promising a review. It wasn't justice, exactly, but it was recognition. Life resumed its usual pace. Jordan went back to work, Renee to her classes, Maya to juggling both, yet the memory lingered, surfacing in small moments, like when Jordan hesitated before speaking up in a meeting, or when Renee caught a sharp tone in a store and felt her chest tighten. One evening, months later, they sat together watching a news story about a similar incident on a different flight. Comment sections scrolled with arguments and denial. Maya muted the TV. "This keeps happening," she said quietly, "and people keep acting surprised." Renee leaned back. "At least we know we're not alone." Jordan nodded. He'd started volunteering with the local youth group, teaching kids about knowing their rights and staying calm under pressure. He never told the full story, but pieces of it shaped his advice. The flight, with all its ugliness, had given them something unexpected: clarity. They understood more sharply how quickly situations could escalate, and how important it was to hold on to dignity when others tried to strip it away. They also understood the cost of always having to be composed. On the anniversary of their grandmother's passing the following year, they traveled again, this time by train. As the landscape rolled by, Maya caught her reflection in the window and smiled faintly. "Different journey," she said. Renee laughed. "Less turbulence." Jordan watched the tracks blur. "But if there is," he said, "we'll handle it." The confidence in his voice surprised him. It felt earned. The memory of Flight 714 would never fully fade, but it no longer defined them. It was one chapter among many, a moment of confrontation that revealed both cruelty and kindness. And whenever they thought back to that cramped aisle and raised voice, they also remembered standing together, choosing calm, and finding strength in unity. Years later, Maya would tell the story to a friend over coffee, emphasizing not the anger but the lesson. Power shows itself in small moments, she said, and so does resistance. Renee, overhearing, would nod in agreement, remembering the way standing up had felt like standing still, rooted. Jordan would listen, realizing how far he'd come from that frightened silence. The world remained complicated, unfair in ways both obvious and subtle. Flights still took off, attendants still enforced rules, and misunderstandings still sparked conflict. But somewhere between boarding and landing, the Siblius had learned that their voices mattered, even when others tried to drown them out. Whenever they traveled now, they shared a look during boarding, an unspoken reminder: stay calm, stay together, take up space. And if someone tried to tell their story for them, they would be ready, not with shouting, but with truth, patience, and the quiet certainty that they belonged wherever they chose to be. That certainty carried them forward into jobs, relationships, and ordinary days shaped by invisible calculations. They learned when to speak, when to rest, and when to demand better without apology. The flight had not broken them. It had revealed them to themselves in uncomfortable clarity. In cramped spaces and open skies alike, they moved with awareness sharpened by experience and memory. They no longer measured worth by how quietly they could endure pressure. Instead, they measured it by how faithfully they showed up for one another and the courage to keep choosing dignity even when the world tested their resolve together. Every single time, always.